fantasy football season. And here's a few running backs I would start this week. The first guy is Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So in his rookie debut for Harris in week 1, it was tough sledding for him versus a tough defense, obviously, in the Buffalo Bills. 16 carries, 45 yards, and only 1 catch on 3 targets for 4 yards. So right here, looks like to me, Harris, he isn't the greatest receivers out of the backfield in the NFL. So that's something he's definitely going to have to work on, in my opinion. But he's still a big physical back. He's still going to get all the touches, and he's a 3-down back here in Pittsburgh. And right here versus the Vegas Raiders in week 2, I think he has a good game. We saw Tyson Williams rush the football well on Monday Night Football versus this Raider defense. And I think that's what Najee Harris is going to do. So I'm going to say he gets 80, 90 total yards and finds the end zone this week. And he's a nice number 1 or 2 running back to have in your lineup, because I think he bounces back. And the Steelers, they don't want to have Ben throwing the ball anymore 30 or 40 times. So right here, I think they're going to feed the rookie, and he's going to pay off with a good fantasy day. The next running back I would start this week is Eli Mitchell of the San Francisco 49ers. So Mitchell, he was a hot waiver wire pickup, no doubt about it, this week. And the biggest pickup so far to date. He had a big ball game in week 1 filling in for Raheem Mostert after Mostert went down with a knee injury, which has cost him 8 weeks now. So Mitchell, him and Sermon probably going to split carries, but I think Mitchell's the favorite, obviously, because Sermon was inactive in week 1, and we saw Mitchell come in and pretty much get all the work. 19 carries, 104 yards, and a touchdown in week 1 versus Detroit. And this week he's at Philadelphia, and I think this ball game is going to be a high-scoring game versus the Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers. So right now, they're projecting them 10 points, but I think Mitchell easily in this one could have another big game. In week 1 versus Detroit, he had 14.5 fantasy points, and I think he could reach that mark once again here with Philly, because this guy's a good running back, and we'll see if he could catch the ball out of the backfield as well. So I could see him getting 12 to 16 carry range with Sermon sprinkled in, and maybe a little Jermichael Hasty as well. But I like Mitchell as a start, and he's a guy that definitely deserves touches after that week 1 performance. The next running back I would start this week's Chase Edmonds of the Arizona Cardinals. So Edmonds and James Conner, I was conflicted last week if I should have put Edmonds in a couple leagues. It cost me not putting him in the lineup. So now, after seeing what happened in week 1 here, Chase Edmonds, in my opinion, he's the better back to have in Arizona, and he's going to be the more versatile back as well, obviously, catching the ball out of the backfield. So we touched in this game 16-12, but James Conner had a lot of closeout 4th quarter rushes in this game where the ball game was out of reach. They destroyed the Tennessee Titans 38-13, but Edmonds, he had a good ball game, 63 rushing yards on 12 carries and 4 catches for 43 yards. So Chase Edmonds, he had a good fantasy day with the 15 fantasy points on the day in PPR leagues. And this week he's got a good matchup versus the Minnesota Vikings. We saw Joe Mixon just go over 100 yards total in that ball game with a touchdown. And I think Chase Edmonds could do the same here, where we're going to see a shootout, in my opinion, in Arizona this week. And Edmonds, he's the clear-cut guy over there. As far as fantasy football, they're still probably going to split carries, but like I said, Chase Edmonds, he's going to be the 3rd down and passing downs back. And right here, he's a very valuable player, in my opinion, to have in PPR leagues. And this week, I like the matchup a lot versus Minnesota. And I think that once again, he could have 15 to 20 fantasy points in this one. The next running back I would look to start this week is Austin Eckler of the Los Angeles Chargers. So in week 1, his workload was pretty weird for Eckler. We didn't see him a lot in this ball game, but he still got the job done and produced. Obviously, he didn't put up number 1 type fantasy running back numbers, 15 carries, 57 yards rushing and a touchdown, but he didn't even get a target or receive the ball out of the backfield. So I think he was a little limited because of the hamstring. Now, he came out of this ball game in week 1 unscathed, and now week 2, he's got a great matchup versus the Dallas Cowboys, who can't stop no one. Let's be real. In this game, though, I think it's going to be a shootout, low 30s to high 30s in this game in Los Angeles, indoors in the turf here. And this is going to be a barn burner of a ball game. So I like all the San Diego Chargers this week pretty much starting, and I like most of the Dallas Cowboys as well to be in starting lineup. So Austin Eckler, it wouldn't surprise me to see him have 100 total yards with a few catches and find the end zone in this one. And the 5th and final running back I would look to start this week's Melvin Gordon of the Denver Broncos. So Melvin Gordon, I was a little shaky on him in week 1. And if it wasn't for that 70-yard touchdown, it was going to be a pretty bad day in week 1 for Melvin Gordon. But he finished the fantasy day with a good ball game. 11 carries, 101 rushing yards, and that touchdown, like I mentioned, and 3 catches for 17 yards. With him and Javonte Williams in week 1, it was pretty much a 50-50 split. But here in week 2, I think Melvin Gordon, he's going to get more carries in this game after showing up and putting that ball game on ice last week at the New York Giants. And this week, he's got a great matchup at the Jacksonville Jaguars that just got gashed by Mark Ingram, who had 26 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown in that ball game. So Melvin Gordon, I think he could do the same in this one. And right here, this Denver Bronco team, their offense looked pretty fluid. And now I think they might even run the ball a little more with Jerry Jeudy out for a few weeks with the high ankle sprain. So right here, I like Gordon more as a flex option than the number 2 running back if you could get away with it. But even that, I think he's a play you got to start in your lineup unless you got a totally stacked offense. But I think Melvin Gordon, he could get 70, 80 total yards in this one and find the end zone. And that's a few running backs I would look to start here in week 2 of the fantasy football season.